Tennessee Life is sponsored by Next to New, an upscale consignment shop serving Knoxville. nexttonewknox.com. And by The Flower Pot, for over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations. knoxvilleflowerpot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Coming up on Tennessee Life. Big and small, countryside and city block. You can see there's a love for gardening all over the state. We visit a family business and homestead that's a go-to greenhouse for gardeners.
We went from mules to tractors to machines now.
Growing food on a farm isn't just happening in the big open spaces. Urban farming is taking root on lots that need a new purpose.
There's all this vacant land in the city. Why couldn't we transform it into something that would give, one, good food to people and also a destination for folks?
And one man in McMinn County has found a way to grow big harvests in small spaces. His specialty? Tomatoes. Those stories next on Tennessee Life.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Tennessee Life. I'm Vicki Lawson. From small gardens in the backyard to the big nurseries that provide a bounty of plants and flowers, the love for gardening comes in many sizes and specialties in Tennessee. Stanley's Greenhouses and Plant Farm not only has all the plants you could ever need, this family business spans 5 generations and has deep historic roots. We talked to some of the family members about what it was like to grow up among the ever-expanding greenhouses. Monty and Rocky, thank you for letting us join you today here on the family homestead, and I understand that this has quite a history. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, this farm was started in the family about in the 1800 time frame about then, and it was mainly a dairy farm and truck farm producing vegetables. As time went on, the 50s and 60s, it gradually turned into more of a flower production as opposed to food crops.
Tell me a little bit about how it evolved from agriculture to horticulture.
Before we had the greenhouses, we had cut flowers. We'd supply a lot of florists, local florists, with cut flowers. But then they began shipping a lot of cut flowers in from South America, and so we my dad started dabbling in, the greenhouse business, and he built the first greenhouse, and we just sort of evolved through the years, adding on a little bit at a time.
Tell me some of your childhood memories of growing up here.
We've always lived here, and I was watching everything be built up, and of course it's a lot of hard work and took a lot of years, but we went from mules to tractors to machines now.
What do each of you remember as your first job that you performed here in the family business?
Well, we would play under the tables while our parents were transplanting or and stuff like that. I remember in the fields we would grow cut flowers, and we were small, and we would place the bulbs. They would let us do that about every couple of feet. And stuff like that. Wrapping pansies in wet newspapers, digging them out of the ground.
Well, I remember my grandparents and my mother, she was young, transplanting little seedlings into little individual pots, and then we'd help fill up the little pots with dirt sometimes.
Still doing that.
And we're still doing it, yeah.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Monty, you're actually living in some of the history here. We're actually sitting on your front porch here at the property. Tell me a little bit about your home here.
It was built either in the late 1790s or early 1800s. The main structure is log underneath the siding, and the big stone chimneys on each end are original as well.
Monty, I understand that there is an interesting connection to William Blount, that you even have a document. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we've got a deed to a portion of the property, and it was signed by Wiley Blount. And he spelled it W-I-L-L-I-E. And I assumed that was abbreviation for nickname for William Blount, but it wasn't. I come to find out it's his half-brother, and it was pronounced Wiley.
Tell me a little bit about what you grow here and what do customers come here the most for?
Unlike most garden centers, we grow over 50% of what we sell is grown right here on site. So everything is local, and we can, control the quality a lot better. We grow vegetable plants, herbs, bedding plants, flowers of all kinds, and we have foliage plants, house plants that we sell year round.
Yeah. And one thing about it, we grow it ourselves. We do from seed or cutting most of the stuff.
So your season's just not during the plant season. Your business is year round, correct?
Yeah. Oh yes, we usually work 3 months out, something like that, from the season. So we'll start spring stuff you see in the winter. Most of the winter we're growing stuff here.
What are some of the best plants to grow in this area or to have at your home in the summer?
Ferns, begonias, impatiens, marigolds, geraniums.
Well, geraniums
Vegetable plants have been pretty big the last few years, and we grow a lot of heirloom type vegetables that the seeds sometimes hard to come by that are not hybrids.
In thinking back of the different plants and the trends of what people like to grow, what are people getting excited about now, having as a plant or a display at their home?
Well, we've seen an upsurge in interest in perennial plants and herbs. People are trying to eat healthier.
Vegetables.
And so there's, especially in the young demographic, they're interested in dabbling in growing their own produce. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to educate the young people.
One big trend, though, is container gardening.
Okay, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, like, people in their apartments or on their porches, or don't have a large yard or such, is for large pots on the patio, and they could grow anything, really, vegetables, tomatoes, or flowers.
What comes to your mind of some of the best new innovative techniques to make your job easier?
I guess the biggest thing in the last 40 years would probably be plug technology, which would be seeding and growing seedlings more efficiently and better, and doing it to where they're able to transplant without transplant shock.
Why do you think that Stanley's is still thriving in the age of the big box store where you can just go across the street and get your plants? Why do you think that you all are successful?
As I say, we grow most of what we have. The big boxes just have plants shipped in from hundreds of miles away. Everything we have is grown right here, and we try to find we have a more extensive selection.
Our selection is so big here that those stores, they physically cannot hold that many plants. Whereas, they might have a fern basket or two. We'll have like 10 kinds of ferns. And usually our plants are fresher. They can pick from a bunch of stuff. And then too, we, like he said, we grow it from seed or cutting ourselves. And so that makes a difference as far as, too, is what we can sell it for. We're more of a producer than just someone who buys and resells. And we can offer that directly to the consumer here without a middleman. And so we can really compete on the price, too, and still make a profit.
What does this property mean to you?
Well, it means everything to me. I grew up here as well as Monty, and we've raised our family here. it's a fun job. It's hard work, but you have to like plants and being in the outdoors a lot. And I think it's a great job.
Yeah. We feel like we're contributing, to Knoxville, making it a more beautiful place to live. And actually, a lot of our customers come from all over East Tennessee to shop with us. We're really blessed.
Monty and Rocky, thank you for spending time with us today and for all the beauty you bring to the community. Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you.
Still to come on Tennessee Life, this man has invented a way to grow hundreds of pounds of tomatoes on 2 little raised beds. And next, farm fresh produce growing in the heart of the city.
Gardens are not just for people in the country with large yards or lots of acreage. At one Knoxville spot among the highways, railroad tracks, and abandoned buildings, you will find food growing on a lot now known as Abbey Fields. We talked to the founder and farmer about how urban farming is taking root and helping neighborhoods.
It's still not super recognizable from the road. The fence helped a lot. People who are familiar with the area know, that something's happening. This used to be an overgrown, trashy lot. So of course when we brought in equipment to clear, and then just seeing people out here was a very different sight for the last few years. But when people, a lot of times people walk by and kind of bring their dogs up and say, oh my gosh, like there's stuff growing here. What is this? How can we get involved? So yeah, it's just something, you literally come right across the tracks and it's there. And so it does surprise a lot of people, yes. My name is Brenna Wright, and we are at Abbey Fields Urban Farm in Knoxville, Tennessee. I first got the idea for Abbey Fields just from kind of reading up on, food security, some of the more abstract ideals of stewardship and land care and community care. I was originally in social work in Kansas. My husband and I have lived here for 5 years now, but I was working in the social work realm in Kansas, and just was really having a hard time with some of the clinical approaches, especially with children. And so it was kind of a little bit stir crazy, I guess, in the walls of those sorts of institutions, and felt like kids needed to get outside, needed to see life, needed to work with their hands and kind of see results. So I kind of had all that stuff going on in my head when we moved here. We started a small garden. We moved just a half a mile away. And so I would walk my dog by this lot and, kind of got this idea, there's all this vacant land in the city. Why couldn't we transform it into something that would give, one, good food to people, and also a destination for folks who need something different. We're kind of right in the middle of 2 neighborhoods, on the side of a highway, the side of a railroad track. This building is the old Standard knitting mill that used to function. It closed down in the late 80s, and so this is part of its green space. We are development supported agriculture, which means the development company that bought that building, that owns this land, has invested in us as a small business venture. And so it's kind of taken off elsewhere in the nation. When they're building new communities, sometimes they'll put in a farm instead of, say, tennis courts or a golf course. They'll just have put in a small scale farm that's walkable distance to their community. And that's kind of like an amenity to that community. So it's caught on in quite a few other states. It's the first of its kind here, but that's what this is essentially. So when they do develop this building, this farm will kind of act as, a green space, a food source, and just an overall kind of pretty thing to consider an amenity. There's a big push, especially in these downtown neighborhoods, to clean up blight. And I think that has been kind of a dream come true for some folks who have lived here for a long time. Just to see this plot transformed into something good, something that they can come visit, come get to know people at. We host a lot of different groups that get to come and work, and we're very thankful for their time and labor. But also they tell us how great it is having a local food source that they can see every time they drive by. It's very reassuring. Because we're small, we plant close together, everything's done by hand. We do have a walk-behind tiller that we use to kind of turn under cover crop and that sort of thing, but most generally everything's done by hand by me or my work shares. So that makes it different, but in that system you can grow more food, which makes an acre and a half able to feed 50 families. So the way that community supported agriculture works is you commit to a farmer or farmers for the duration of their seasons. You pay for your share up front, and I commit to having vegetables for them 27 weeks out of the year. You know, some weeks you're getting twice what you paid for, some weeks you're getting right at what you paid for, and some weeks, you know, I might have lost all of my cauliflower and Brussels sprouts and you just don't get those. So you're not only investing in local agriculture, but you're also investing in someone's livelihood, the livelihood of the piece of property they're stewarding, and you're kind of saying, we're in this with you. However this goes, we support you in your project and your mission. A good example of our share today is tomatoes, chard, cucumbers, squash, potatoes, onions, garlic. What I tell people is pretty much anything you see at the farmer's market, we grow here. Because we're in the model of community supported agriculture, people come weekly, they pick up a bit of vegetables. I like to give them a variety of different things. So we don't grow a lot of anything. We grow a big diversity of things. Today is one of our pickup days. I'll just have a steady flow of work shares that come in, help me harvest. We wash everything, and then people will start coming at 4, and we just load up their bags. They say hi, and then they go. Yeah. Is this for someone? It is a labor of love to be able to work and provide food for them. They bring their kids, and you say, oh, you know, you think in your head, I'm helping to feed that family. I love that they get to see what their investment is doing. So when they come and see, you know, we've built another section of the farm, or we've got this group out that's helping us, you know, it's just very gratifying for them to be able to come here directly to the farm where they're getting their food and see the difference we're making in the community. So it's kind of just full circle every pickup day, I feel like. I still feel hokey sometimes when I say I'm an urban farmer. I would much rather start with like my experience on a rural 30-acre farm rather than say I run an acre and a half farm in the middle of the city. So I think I'm still getting over that hump that, you know, it's not just container gardening. It's not just people like having a bed and then working it when they have time. You can actually have a working farm that is enriching a piece of property, that is providing good food for families, but it can be in the middle of the city. Why shouldn't it be in the middle of the city? You know, if we've got all this blighted land, why not use it for that? For me, this site is very endearing. For, you know, new people coming to the farm, they don't see it yet. But because I've worked with my hands and my friends and different organizations, I have deeper memories already of this place, which makes me care for it differently.
Now we head to Etowah in McMinn County, where one man has found a way to grow tomato plants that look more like tomato trees. John Dewey has always had a love for gardening. He's come up with some inventions and books to help you grow bigger vegetables in small spaces.
Ever since I was small, I've been gardening. So it's something that I've done for years and years and years. I've tried to perfect it so I can grow more food in smaller spaces using less water. My name is John Dewey. I live in Etowah, Tennessee, and my passion is gardening. The things that we have growing in these two gardens right now, we have lots of tomatoes. They end up being tomato trees. Last year, to get them out of the ground, we actually had to saw them out of the ground because the main root is so big. The tallest tomato plant I ever grew was 20 feet, 8.5 inches tall, and we got 372 pounds of tomatoes off one plant. We grow 10.5, 12.5 footers now, and they'll still produce 150 to 200 pounds per plant on the better boys. Like I said, the better boys for me are the king of the garden. I first got interested in gardening when I was a little kid. My mother and I lived with my aunt and uncle when I was growing up on their small farm, and we mostly had animals, but my uncle and I put out a big vegetable garden every year. My uncle, he was a World War II veteran. He was at the Battle of Okinawa, and how he got this home, or why he even had it, I don't know which, but it was the bottom bubble from an airplane, the machine gun turret, and he used this clear dome turret as a greenhouse. And what he'd do was every spring we'd go out there, he'd cut 2 new pieces of cloth and 2 new pieces of tape and put them over where the machine guns would stick out. And during the day he would lift up the cloth, let the heat out, and at nighttime he'd put the cloth down to keep the frost from getting the plants. So I learned a lot about repurposing items for different uses from him. When we were on the farm, you had to come up with new ways to make, we didn't have a whole lot of money, and you had to scavenge around and find new ways to invent things, to get things to work on the farm, and I do the same thing here. When my wife and I bought our first house, there wasn't a whole lot of room to put in a big tilled garden, so I started using the raised bed gardens, and I said, wow, this is really great. And I said, well, how can I make this better? And that's when I started developing my fertilizers. I had this great big animal hypodermic needle, and I would suck my fertilizers up in this great big animal hypodermic needle, shove it into the ground so I would get it right to the roots. And then the year after I invented the fertilizer, got the perfect fertilizer, I ended up getting carpal tunnel syndrome in both hands. And my hands hurt so bad, I couldn't pull the plunger back on the hypodermic. So I said, well, how am I going to get this fertilizer to the roots of my plants? And in a day and a half, I set out the design to build the first water stick. Most gardeners do surface watering. That's where they just pour the water on top of the ground. Well, that is very wasteful. On my tomato plants, where I buried the root ball 6 to 8 inches deep, I'd have to pour 3 or 4 gallons of water on top just to hopefully get maybe a quart to a half a gallon down to the root. Well, with my water stick, I bypass those 6 or 8 inches and I go directly to the root, water the root, the entire root, and water underneath the root, so the roots get bigger, plants get bigger, produces more produce. I wrote 2 books, so they're both called the 20-Foot Tomato Plant. One's called the 20-Foot Tomato Plant, the other one's called the 20-Foot Tomato Plant 2 the next season. And in these books I teach you how to make everything that I use here in the garden. For people who want to buy a water stick, now I teach them how to make it in the book, and it's not that hard. I try to make it in the books. I try to make it as easy and fun as possible. You know, I even tell you some of the goofy things that we actually did that got me in trouble with my wife over some of the things that I did. In places like California, Arizona, you know, Texas, places where they're having a lot of drought, my water sticks would be a big help because I use 75% less water than the average gardener, because I'm watering at root level, because I'm saving all that water, I'm bypassing all that soil. It just makes sense to grow food as most efficiently as possible. It's basically what we're doing is almost hydroponics underground, because in hydroponics you water the roots at root level. We're watering the roots at root level. I can also fertilize them and give them the organic pest repellent at root level. We have rain barrels on the house and on the carport, and then we also keep some right here near the garden, so it's not so far for us to get the water from. I think rainwater is better because it doesn't have the chemicals in it that your tap water does, and it's also better for the organic fertilizers. The organic fertilizers get more nutrition out of rainwater than they would the tap water. The tap water will actually kill all the good microorganisms that we're trying to grow. So our actual growing space inside the garden, not counting the cement outside, is 12 foot by 4 foot. 4 foot wide, 12 foot long. And we have 2 of those. And I can grow more food in those 2 gardens than most people can in the garden 5 times its size. We eat a lot out of these gardens. In the spring, when we had the lettuce, the spinach, and the potatoes planted, that was all grown in a 4 foot by 4 foot section. We had spinach, we had 3 different types of lettuce, and then we had potatoes. We ended up eating big salads every day. We each had a big salad every day for dinner, and we had friends and neighbors come over. We'd take some over to them, and then when the warm weather started to get here and the plants were getting ready to bolt, you couldn't even tell that we had even picked anything out of there in 7 weeks. The garden was that full, and so I didn't want to waste any of it, so we picked out as much as we could eat in about a week, and then we had our friends, neighbors, people from the church, and when they were coming over, they were pulling it out by the multiple bagfuls, at least anywhere from 2 to 4 grocery bags stuffed with lettuce and spinach. And so it feeds a lot of people, and it's an easy way to garden. Tennessee is probably one of the best places to start a garden because you have a really long season. I mean, if you're lucky, you can start planting. Well, we do it earlier, but you can actually start planting in the end of March, and if you're really lucky, the season will go all the way until real close to the end of October. So that's a long gardening season. Everybody needs to know how to grow at least some of their own food. With today's food prices, you want to be able to grow your own food so you can cut down on your grocery bill, plus the fact that you know what's in the vegetables that you're growing. I know that everything in there is good quality. Most of it's all organic, and so I know what we're eating, and it tastes better.
We hope you've enjoyed this special look at gardening in Tennessee, and maybe now you're inspired to do a little planting and gardening of your own. I'm Vicki Lawson. See you on the next Tennessee Life.
Tennessee Life is sponsored by Next to New, an upscale consignment shop serving Knoxville, nexttonewknox.com, and by The Flower Pot, for over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations, knoxvilleflowerpot.com, and by viewers like you. Thank you. A DVD of this program is available by visiting easttennesseepbs.org.